Snow holds the town in a padded hush, the kind that makes even car horns sound polite. I walk home with my scarf high to my nose, the streetlights dropping coins of amber onto the pavement. In so many windows, trees still blink, wreaths insist on cheer, and the last of December sits heavy in bowls of clementines. I imagine stepping into our house with the same glow inside me, the envelope in my bag like a small lantern. My Christmas bonus, proof that a year of showing up mattered. Mom's rosemary chicken greets me first. "Emily?" she calls as I kick off my boots. The living room glitters with the thin bravery of tinsel, and our modest tree hums. From the garage, metal thuds, then my stepdad's satisfied grunt, the house shivering in reply. What's he fixing now? I ask, sliding my bag strap off a sore shoulder. The alternator finally died, Mom says, folding a dish towel. He's been at it for hours. I have never made peace with car words. They feel like rulers of a kingdom I'm allowed to visit but not touch. I pat the envelope through the fabric, steadying myself. That money is a promise. The first month's rent on a studio with Eastlight, a bed I'll build myself, plates that match, a weekend at the ocean to rinse the year out of my bones. We sit for dinner. Mark smells like cold air and oil, half his fingernails dark crescents. He recounts the alternator saga with patient heroism, cataloging bolts like old friends. It's always the timing, he says. They never break in June. Or after payday, Mom adds, aiming for levity. Her laugh lands short, like a paper airplane that meets a wall. When she glances at me, the small sun in my chest falters. After the dishes, I settle by the tree and take out the envelope. EMILY, printed in tidy capitals. The paper looks ceremonial among needles, like a boat waiting for launch. "Sweetheart," Mom calls softly, drying her hands. "Can we talk?" I know the tone. It's the one she uses when she needs me to be older than I am. We meet between tile and carpet, the border where most of our bargains have been struck. "Your stepdad's car," she begins. Apology in the grammar. "It died outside Lewis Auto yesterday. They towed it, but to tow was to owe, and I ask, though the envelope grows heavier in my palm. "And we had to pay today," she says in a rush. "Mark needs it for work. We were going to ask you, but you were late, and you sounded so tired, and you used my bonus," I say. Not a question. Her face collapses a little. "Just this once. We'll make it right." "How?" I hear my voice and barely recognize its control. "With what?" "Taxes, maybe? Or the cost of living raise? Or—" She trails off under the judgment of numbers. Mark steps in, wiping his hands on a rag that has given up the fight. "It was an emergency, Em. They wouldn't release it otherwise. Kindness needs cash. I know what cash needs." Heat climbs my throat. The bonus had been more than money. It had been permission. Proof that I could move without asking. "You didn't even tell me. We planned to tell you tonight," Mom murmurs. "After," I say. "That's not telling. That's deciding for me. Surviving," Mark says. "That's family. Family drops between us like a coin into a well whose bottom never answers." The tree's angel sits crooked, serene without earning it. Something inside me presses hard against my ribs. "I need air," I say, and step into the cold. The night is a glass I fog with each breath. Houses glow like soft ships in a black sea. I walk without choosing where, turning corners as if turning pages. The envelope emptied now, I realize flat against my thigh like a spent match. I had imagined that money differently. Keys signing in a new door, a window facing morning, a quiet that belongs to me. On Maple and 3rd, a coffee shop still glows, its windows fogged, its chalkboard promising gingerbread in cheerful cursive. Warmth is a kind of forgiveness, so I go in. The barista's Santa hat lists to one side like a weary sail. Rough night? She asks. Family math, I say. 2 + 1 = 0. She gives me a sympathetic huff. Gingerbread? Please. I wrap my hands around the cup and let heat teach my fingers hope. Outside, a couple in matching hats laughs, fogging the glass with their winter novella. Inside, a song with polite sleigh bells stitches the air together. I open my banking app like maybe Mercy made a glitch. It didn't. Lewis Auto, the exact amount my heart had already measured. A line item with a timestamp where my plan used to live. Mark has fixed so many things in our house that I understand. His faith in solutions, the door that stuck, the sink that whispered, the vacuum that screamed like a spaceship. He taught me to change a tire on a day the wind salted my cheeks with sleet. He is good in daily ways. But goodness doesn't cancel hurt. It only confuses the math. My phone lights. Come home, please, we'll talk. Then, I'm sorry. Mom's apologies come in soft fonts. I type and delete responses. Finally, later, need a walk. The message looks small and firm and true. I sip and watch the door open. Open, open. Winter entering in brief, sculpted gusts. The city carousel spins, every face carrying its private holiday. Someone declaring love too loud on speakerphone. A child eyeing a cupcake like destiny. A man in a suit grinning at no one. I wonder how many of us had our year spent by someone else. When I stand to leave, the barista says, "It gets better," like someone who has outlived at least 3 bad Decembers. Does it? I ask. It changes, she says, which might be the same thing. Outside, the dark is generous enough to hold me. Snow squeaks answers with each step. Near home, a single premature firework scribbles light and disappears, smoke spelling nothing. I pause at the foot of the driveway and stare at the garage door as if it could testify. Instead of going in, I loop around to the backyard. The maple wears a coat of frost. Every branch returns the porch light to itself. I sit on the step and let the cold find me. I think of the invisible tax of being the dependable one, the way I have forgiven quietly, like paying a toll no one else seems to notice. I picture the ocean I haven't booked yet, its patience pounding the same stone until the stone remembers it can be sand. The back door opens. Mom steps out, sweaterless, still holding the towel like a truce flag. "You'll freeze," she says. "I'm okay." She sits beside me without asking. We watch our breath braid and unbraid in the air, each exhale a brief ghost. "I shouldn't have done it," she says at last. "Not like that." I panicked. "I'm not a savings account," I say. The words are small, but entirely mine. "I know." She leans her head on my shoulder, a gesture from a kinder decade. "When your father left, I learned to do things fast and ask forgiveness slow. It's a bad habit. Something in me loosens with that honesty, like a door, swollen with rain, finally giving. I wanted to move out, I admit. I wanted my own table. "You will," she says. "We'll help." I almost laugh, because help is the problem. "Not by taking," I say. "By respecting." We sit long enough for the tips of our ears to warn us red. Inside, Mark moves like a man trying to make his body into an apology. At last, Mom touches my hand. "Will you come in?" "In a minute." She nods and slips back through the door, the house swallowing her with a sigh. I stay until the stars sharpen and the porch light buzzes like a stubborn thought. Then I go inside, through the kitchen, where Mark is washing the same fork again and again. "I'm sorry," he says, and the words look awkward in his large hands. "I'm learning how to ask. I'm learning how to say no," I answer. We hold that truth between us like a fragile plate that finally matches the set dot in my room. I close the door and sit on the floor, among the geometry of shoes and books. I crack the window for a ribbon of honest cold. On a clean page of my notebook, I write January. Then, save again. Ocean Spring. Apartment East Light. Boundaries, gentle and steel. Keep kindness. Stop bleeding. The letters look like small rungs on a ladder. I feel the faintest descent. Down the street, another practice firework scribbles silver. I stand to watch it unspool. A brief constellation that writes nothing, and yet insists the sky can carry brightness again. I press my palm to the cool glass and see my reflection doubled, the me who pays without being asked. And the me who is deciding not to do that anymore, not tomorrow, is New Year's Eve. The town will pour into the square. Strangers will count backwards towards some agreed-upon hope. I don't know what will happen there, or who, but I know this. I am walking toward it with my eyes open, my hands empty, my spine newly lit from within. I breathe and let it settle. Snow drifts like scattered confetti as Emily threads her way through the city streets. Every storefront window is lit up with promises of new beginnings, sale banners, glittering mannequins in silver sequins, champagne bottles tilted in displays like soldiers at attention. Yet inside her chest, the celebration feels counterfeit. She pulls her coat tighter, her breath a plume of steam. Her family's words echo from earlier. We had no choice. Family means sacrifice. She wonders if anyone realizes how much of her has already been sacrificed. Ahead, the square blazes with light. A massive clock looms above the crowd, its hands dragging toward midnight. Speakers pump music into the frosted air, blending with the sound of laughter, chatter, the occasional pop of early fireworks. Emily presses into the crowd, searching for space, for air, for something that doesn't feel like obligation. She slips between strangers, the scent of roasted chestnuts and mulled wine wrapping around her. Couples lean close, whispering, their noses brushing, while groups of friends shout resolutions over the beat of the music. Emily feels like the only solitary figure in a painting of togetherness. Then it happens, sudden and sharp. A shoulder collides with hers, hard enough to jolt her out of thought. "Oh, sorry," she blurts. Spinning dot, the man steadies her with a hand at her elbow, warm, even through the layers of fabric. His face comes into focus beneath the street lamp glow. Dark hair dusted with snowflakes, eyes a shade that seems to shift between gray and blue. He isn't smiling fully, but there's a quiet curve at the corner of his mouth, the kind of expression that feels earned rather than given. "No harm done," he says, voice low and even, carrying oddly well above the noise. For a moment, neither of them moves. The crowd swells around them, yet it feels like the air has opened just wide enough to fit two people. Emily exhales, realizing she's still gripping her bag strap as if it were an anchor. "Guess I wasn't watching where I was going." "Neither was I," he admits. "But maybe we were supposed to bump into each other." His words hover, playful yet disarmingly sincere. Emily's instinct is to laugh it off, to tuck the comment somewhere she won't revisit, but something in his tone stops her. Instead, she hears herself say, "That's a very convenient philosophy." Convenient, maybe. Or fate. The word fate drops between them, heavier than it should be. Emily feels her throat tighten, the crowd's noise dimming. She doesn't believe in fate, not after a year of disappointments carved deep into her bones. And yet, here she is, looking into eyes that seem to notice her more than anyone has in months. "On Daniel," he says, releasing her elbow gently. "Emily." She hesitates, then adds, "And no, I don't usually run into strangers on holidays." Then I should feel honored. His smile finally blooms, faint but genuine, and something inside her shifts, like a thaw beneath frozen soil. They walk together through the crowd, not quite side by side at first. The clock ticks louder above, the numbers glowing against the night. Daniel asks where she's from, What brought her out tonight? Emily answers with half-truths. I needed air. Just wanted to see the fireworks, leaving out the wound of her stolen bonus, the anger boiling beneath her ribs. And you? She asks, eager to redirect. Friends invited me. But he gestures vaguely to the crowd. Noise and I don't always get along. I wandered off. Emily studies him. He doesn't fidget or check his phone. He just watches the square with a steady gaze, as though memorizing the chaos. It strikes her that he, too, is an outsider tonight. Orbiting the edges of Celebration Dot, they reach the center, where a stage glows with light, performers hyping the countdown. Music thunders, laughter spikes. Daniel glances down at her, his expression softer now. Do you have a resolution? He asks Dot the question, innocent as it sounds, lands like a challenge. Emily thinks of her notebook, of the words she scribbled last night. Ocean, apartment, boundaries. She wants to answer honestly, but she swallows it back. Survive, she says lightly. He tilts his head. That sounds more like a battle plan than a resolution. Maybe it is. For a moment, their eyes hold, and Emily feels something tremble inside her chest. She wonders what he'd say if she told him everything, the betrayal, the anger, the loneliness that drove her here tonight. Instead, she just says, What about you? Daniel shrugs. To live more honestly. The words are simple, yet they pierce through her armor. Honesty something she craves, but rarely receives. Above them, the crowd begins to chant. 10, 9, 8. The square vibrates with anticipation. Emily feels Daniel's shoulder brush hers, and instead of stepping away, she leans just slightly, but enough. 7, 6, 5. Fireworks wait like sleeping giants overhead. Emily's pulse quickens, though she's not sure if it's for the sky or for the man standing close enough that she can smell the faint cedar of his cologne. 4, 3, 2, 1. The sky erupts. Color floods the darkness, streaks of gold and crimson shattering the night. The crowd roars, glasses clink, lips find lips. Emily tilts her head back, the brilliance of it reflecting in her eyes. Beside her, Daniel doesn't cheer. He watches the fireworks in silence, and then quietly, Happy New Year, Emily. The way he says her name makes her chest ache. Happy New Year, she whispers back. For a breath, it feels like the universe has paused, just for them, the cold air suspended, the light painting their faces with borrowed stars. But then the moment fractures. A group pushes past, laughing, spilling champagne. The crowd swells tighter. Daniel steps back slightly, as though reality has reasserted itself. Emily's heart stumbles. She doesn't want this to end, not yet. But she has nothing to offer him except her name. And perhaps that isn't enough. Daniel checks his watch, then looks at her. Can I walk you somewhere safer? Crowds get messy after midnight. The offer is simple, kind. Yet she senses a line walk with him, or let him vanish into the night like all fleeting holiday encounters. She hesitates. Independence claws at her ribs. She doesn't need saving. And yet, part of her longs to say yes, to let someone steady her, even for a few streets. Finally, she nods. All right. They move through the thinning crowd together. Street lamps glow halos on the icy sidewalks, laughter fading into the distance. Neither speaks much, but the silence feels companionable. Not straying. At the corner near her street, they pause. Emily's building looms ahead, lights dim in half the windows. Thank you, she says, meaning more than the walk. Daniel studies her for a moment, his breath clouding the air. Maybe we'll run into each other again. Maybe. He smiles faintly, then turns and disappears into the night, his figure swallowed by snow and shadow. Emily stands there longer than she should, staring at the space where he vanished, heart pounding with a question she can't answer. Was it chance or something more? The first week of January, arrives with gray skies that feel endless, heavy clouds pressing down as though they've forgotten what it means to lift. Emily wakes to her alarm, the same steady chime that slices through her dreams each morning. The days fold into one another. Work, train rides, and nights spent staring at the same ceiling. Yet between the monotony, something glimmers in her thoughts. Daniel. It's strange how a brief encounter with a stranger can feel so alive in memory. She sees him in flashes, the way his breath turned to silver mist under the fireworks, the sound of her name in his voice, the way silence seemed to fit them without effort. He had said, "Maybe we'll run into each other again." Emily laughs softly to herself as she pulls on her coat for work. "That's not how life works," she mutters. But the thought lingers, stubborn and warm. Days pass. Snow piles on sidewalks, turning to slush beneath hurried boots. One afternoon, craving warmth, Emily ducks into a coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a florist, a place she has never noticed before. The bell over the door jingles, releasing a swirl of roasted beans and cinnamon. The shop hums with quiet music, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that settles into your bones. She shakes snow from her scarf and steps toward the counter. And then a voice, "Emily." Her body stiffens. Slowly, she turns. Daniel sits at a corner table, a book open before him, a half-empty cup steaming at his side. His expression shifts from surprise to something softer, warmer, as though he had been waiting without admitting it to himself. Emily blinks, caught between disbelief and the absurd rhythm of her own heart. "Daniel?" He stands, closing the book with an almost guilty quickness. "I thought I was imagining you. I thought I was imagining you," she echoes, a laugh spilling out despite herself. The air between them tightens, not uncomfortable, but charged. The coffee shop fades into a blur. The hiss of milk frothing, the clink of cups, the muted chatter of strangers. All Emily sees is him. "Join me?" he asks, gesturing to the chair across from his. She hesitates, a cautious voice in her head reminding her of wounds still raw. But her feet move before her mind catches up, carrying her toward him. She sits, her coat still on, heart still racing. "I didn't expect to see you again," Emily says, wrapping her hands around the paper cup she orders just to keep from fidgeting. Daniel tilts his head, studying her with that same steady calm she remembers. "Maybe I wasn't wrong about fate after all." She tries to mask the way her chest flutters. "Or maybe this city is just small. Small enough for you to end up here, in this coffee shop, at this exact time?" His smile is playful, but his eyes are serious. Emily lowers her gaze, hiding behind the steam rising from her cup. "You're persistent. Only when something feels worth it." Silence pulls between them, but it isn't awkward. The coffee shop buzzes around them, yet their table feels like a small island, separate and safe. "So," Daniel says, leaning back, "tell me about you." Not the New Year's Eve small talk version. The real one. Emily bites her lip. It's been so long since someone asked without expectation. She thinks of her parents, of the envelope that vanished without permission, of how much she wants to share, but how dangerous it feels to let someone see her. Bruises. "I work in accounting," she begins carefully. "Numbers, spreadsheets, not glamorous, but steady. And?" He prompts gently, as if he knows that's only the surface. "And?" She hesitates, then lets a fragment slip. "I'm trying to figure out what I want to be outside of other people's needs." Daniel's expression softens. "That sounds harder than it should be." "It is." The words come out almost like a sigh. She wonders if he hears what she isn't saying, that her family has taken more than she can afford. That trust feels like a currency she no longer believes in. He doesn't press. Instead, he shares. "I used to be in architecture. I thought designing buildings was all I ever wanted. But life had other ideas. I left that behind. What do you do now? Consulting. Less glamorous than architecture, but steadier. Funny how we both ended up with jobs that feel safe rather than bold. Maybe bold is overrated. Emily murmurs. Daniel studies her, and his gaze lingers in a way that makes her feel both seen and unsettled. Or maybe bold is exactly what we both need. They talk until the shop empties, until the barista wipes counters and shoots them subtle glances. Their conversation drifts like music, weaving between the light and the heavy. They laugh over childhood memories, swap stories about books and movies, confess to strange quirks. Daniel can't stand mint in desserts. Emily hoards notebooks she never fills. Every time she laughs, Daniel watches her as though memorizing the sound. And every time his voice dips low, something in Emily's chest answers, uninvited and undeniable. When the barista finally announces closing, they step out together into the brittle night air. Snow falls again, thin and light this time, catching in the glow of street lamps. Their breath mingles in the space between them. "Thank you," Emily says, pulling her coat tighter. "For what?" "For making tonight feel different." Daniel steps closer, not enough to overwhelm, just enough for warmth to reach her through the cold. Maybe it doesn't have to be different just tonight. Her heart stumbles. She wants to believe him. But behind her ribs, the old wound whispers. People take. People disappoint. She feels the ghost of the envelope in her bag, already spent without her permission. "I don't know," she admits, voice barely above the hush of snow. Daniel doesn't push. He simply nods, as though he understands. "Then let's not go together. See where it goes." Emily looks up at him, the flakes catching in his hair, the city reflected in his eyes. For the first time in months, she feels the possibility of something gentle, something real. They walk side by side down the street, their shoulders brushing now and then, each touch sending sparks through the cold. She wants to reach for his hand, but doesn't. He wants to ask for her number, but waits, sensing she isn't ready. The silence between them is enough, for now. At her corner, they pause. The street is quiet, the city's noise muffled by snow. "I'll see you again," Daniel says. Not a question, but a promise. Emily swallows, her breath shaky. "Maybe you will." As he turns to leave, she watches him disappear into the blur of falling snow. And though the night is cold, her chest carries warmth, fragile and flickering, like the first spark of fire. Emily sat by her bedroom window one quiet Saturday morning, the pale winter sun slipping shyly through the glass. She traced a circle on the fogged pane with her fingertip and exhaled slowly, her thoughts caught somewhere between warmth and fear. For the past 2 weeks, Daniel had become a constant in her life. Coffee shop afternoons, long evening walks, and the kind of conversations that made hours vanish like minutes. And yet, every time she laughed too hard or leaned too close, a warning bell rang in her chest. "Careful," the voice inside whispered. "People take. People leave." Her phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the fragile silence. A text. "Daniel, are you free this afternoon? There's an exhibit at the museum. Thought of you." Emily smiled despite herself, thumb hovering above the keyboard. She typed yes and then deleted it, her hesitation scribbling over her certainty. Finally, she typed, "Emily, sure. What time?" At the museum, Daniel greeted her with his familiar half-smile, his hair mussed by the wind. He carried 2 tickets, one already folded from his nervous grip. "You came," he said softly, as though he doubted it. "I said I would." Emily tucked her scarf tighter, masking the tremor in her voice. Inside, the warmth enveloped them, along with the hush of polished floors and murmured admiration. The gallery stretched high above, walls lined with art that seemed to breathe. Daniel guided her toward an exhibit of black and white photographs, stark cityscapes, lonely faces, moments of unspoken stories. "This one," Daniel said, pausing before a portrait of a woman leaning against a rain-slicked window. Her eyes were downcast, her expression unreadable. I like the way it feels. Honest. Like she isn't pretending for the camera. Emily studied it, the gray tones shadowing the woman's face. She looks guarded, like she wants to let someone in, but doesn't know if she can. Daniel glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. You read a lot into it. Maybe I see myself, Emily admitted before she could stop herself. The words slipped out like an unguarded breath. Daniel's gaze lingered, steady and gentle. You don't always have to guard yourself with me. Her stomach tightened. She wanted to believe him, but belief felt like stepping off a cliff. She turned to the next frame instead, pretending to examine it, her heart beating a rhythm she didn't trust. Later, they sat in the museum cafe, the hum of espresso machines filling the space. Daniel stirred his coffee absently, his eyes studying her as if searching for answers she wasn't ready to give. You pull away sometimes, he said finally, his tone neither accusing nor casual. Like you're here, and then you're not. Emily gripped her cup tighter. Heat rose in her cheeks, the fragile fortress of her composure threatening to crumble. I don't mean to. I know. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. But I want to understand. What are you afraid of? Her breath caught. The cafe around them blurred. The chatter, the clinking cups, the grind of beans, all muffled by the weight of his question. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. I've been let down before, she whispered. By people I trusted the most. I don't know if I can. She faltered, the words tangling in her throat. Daniel reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. He didn't force the touch, only offered it like an open door. You don't have to tell me everything, he said gently. But I want you to know I'm not going anywhere just because you need time. The sincerity in his voice pulled at her defenses. Her eyes stung, and she blinked quickly, forcing the tears back. Vulnerability felt dangerous, yet his patience felt like safety she hadn't known in years. She allowed her hand to rest in his, the contact tentative, trembling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. That evening, Daniel walked her home. Snowflakes fell in delicate spirals, landing on their coats and melting instantly. Emily found herself telling him small pieces of herself, how she used to sketch as a child, how she dreamed of living by the ocean one day, how she sometimes felt invisible in her own family. Daniel listened, not interrupting. His silence and anchor dotted her building. They lingered by the steps. Street lamps glowed halos in the falling snow. I like knowing these parts of you, Daniel said softly. Even the pieces you think are too small to matter. Emily's throat tightened again. What if the bigger parts are harder? Then I'll wait for them, he replied, his voice steady. For a moment, she wanted to close the distance between them, to let her lips find his and silence the fears clawing at her chest. But the walls inside her rose again, whispering caution. Instead, she offered a small smile and whispered, "Good night." Daniel nodded, though his eyes held a question he didn't ask. "Good night, Emily." She climbed the steps, the warmth of his words following her like a second coat. Yet inside, once the door closed, the familiar ache returned. She leaned against the wood, her breath shaky, her heart torn between yearning and fear. That night, she lay awake, Daniel's patience replaying in her mind. She imagined the walls around her heart, bricks stacked by years of disappointment, mortar made from betrayal. And she pictured his hand at the base of that wall, not pushing, not tearing, simply waiting. But how long could anyone wait before giving up? Rain arrived without warning, the kind that fell in clean sheets, as if the sky wanted to rinse the city and start over. Emily and Daniel had been walking along the river, sleeves brushing, talking about small things, dogs and sweaters, the bakery that still smelled like cinnamon, when the first cold bead touched her cheek. Another tapped her wrist. Then the downpour gathered its hem and ran. Run? Daniel laughed. Run, she said, and they sprinted for a tiny bandstand with a domed roof in curling black iron. The roof rang with 1,000 soft hammers. Streetlights smeared across the wet world. Emily's sweater clung. Water traced the line of her throat. Storms made everything honest. Here, Daniel said, lifting his jacket as a useless awning. They laughed, soaked anyway. Under the bandstand, the city blurred river pewter, sky charcoal, windows gold. Better? Perfect. She hugged her arms. We look like deflated parade balloons. I look heroic, he said, then ruined it with a snort. When he met her eyes, comedy softened to concern. You okay? The rain had stripped the world of disguises. Something in the drumming sky matched the pressure Emily had carried since December. The bandstand felt like a confessional. Do you ever repeat a truth until it becomes a lie? She asked. Which truth? That I'm strong, she said. That I don't need anyone. That being needed is the same as being loved. He took a half step closer, not touching. What happened? She leaned on the iron rail and watched rain stitch the river into lace. On Christmas, my job gave me a bonus, she said. Enough for a deposit on a small apartment East Light, a table I'd picked myself. I kept the envelope like a talisman. Then my stepdad's car broke down. They used my bonus to fix it, without asking. They told me after, over dinner, like it was weather. His face opened the way a hand does. They used it without telling you. She nodded. They said it was an emergency. Family is a circle. Money belongs in the middle. They aren't villains. They panic about bills, and he needs the car, and I'm the dependable one. But it emptied me. It was the first thing in years that was entirely mine, and then it wasn't. He listened like a reader, following the quiet between the lines. Somewhere beyond the path, a siren blurred, then faded. I'm angry with them, she said, and with myself. For being surprised. For being the girl who says it's okay, so easily that everyone believes it, including me. Did you tell them? He asked softly. Some of it. She rubbed her arms. The chill lived deeper than skin. I walked for hours. I wrote vows in a notebook like a teenager. Boundaries, gentle and steel. Then I met you under the fireworks, and the world made a new noise. A shy smile flickered. I'm sorry that happened. You deserved to be asked, to be trusted with your own yes or no. Heat touched her from the inside. Thank you, she said. They stood very still. She could hear his breath. She wanted him to hold her, and also didn't. Wanted the reassurance of arms, and the safety of her own spine. It's strange, she said, half laughing. I kept waiting for my life to start when I had a key to another door. The first thing that woke me was talking with you. That doesn't feel strange, he said. Just human. She turned fully toward him. Wet strands framed her face. I don't know what to do with wanting to trust you and being afraid of that want. Then we hold both, he said. Let them sit at the same table. We'll pour them tea. It should have been corny. The rain turned it into a small spell. Emily laughed, and something unknotted. Emily, he said after a beat, thank you for telling me. Thank you for letting me. Quiet widened, expectant. He lifted a hand, slow enough for her to read it, and touched the curl at her temple. Is this okay? She nodded. She took his fingers, interlacing. Behind them, Rain applauded. Tell me something true about you, she said. He looked toward the river, then down. I left architecture, he said. You know that. What I didn't say is why. She waited. A design of mine failed, he said. Not headlines failed, paper cut failed. A small civic shelter, The budget got trimmed. I bent too easily. Corners I didn't fight for became corners people banged shins on. It stood, but when winter came the doors whistled, and I heard my name in the sound. I told myself consulting was stability. The truth is, I was ashamed. And now? I still hear it sometimes, he said. On good days, I believe I'm rebuilding. She squeezed his hand. That's brave to say out loud. It's easier in the rain, he said, and they both smiled. A gust broke the curtain of water into beads. Headlights bowed and rose. The world felt paired to essentials. Can I kiss you? Daniel asked. The question arrived like the first warm front in April, unexpected, inevitable. Yes, she said. He kissed her like the bandstand might unbolt if he weren't careful. Rain and the river's cold mouth slid to the edges. His mouth was gentle, then certain, then gentle again. Emily leaned and let her body answer without asking permission from fear. It wasn't tidy. It was damp and real, and therefore perfect. When they parted, they pressed foreheads together. Hi, he said, ridiculous and sincere. Hi, she answered. Thunder rolled somewhere to the south. The moment deepened, and she noticed it, a quick shadow across his eyes. He pulled a breath like someone bracing. What? She asked. Nothing, he said too quickly. She stepped back half a pace. The air cooled where their bodies had fit. Daniel, he swallowed. Rain stitched the silence shut. There's something I should tell you, he said. About my ex? Maya. The name tugged. Okay, she said carefully. She reached out, he said. A few days ago. I didn't reply. He exhaled. We ended badly. I thought I was done. I am done. But hearing from her stirred sentiment, I thought had settled. The ache of her own. Confession met the pinch of his withheld truth. Why didn't you tell me before? I didn't want to shift the weight onto you, he said. I wanted one simple night. We chose rain and honesty, not simple. I know. He scowled at himself. I'm telling you now, because you're not a night. You're not an interruption. The words steadied her, but not completely. Do you want to see her? No. The refusal arrived fast, like a door swung shut. But she exists in my past and may try to step into my present. I don't intend to let her. I wanted you to know before it got messy. Rain softened. Emily breathed, counted to 3, then 5. The reflex to say, it's fine, lifted and sat back down. I appreciate you telling me, she said. I don't love that you waited. I'm sorry. I'm scared, she added. Not of her. Of repeating a life where my needs go quiet. I don't want your needs quiet, he said. I want to hear them, even when they're inconvenient. The rain thinned to a nervous tapping. A bus hissed by. She studied his face, the earnestness, the trace fear. Secrets don't become less true because they're delayed. Yet a man daring to tell one in the middle of a perfect kiss might be telling her who he wishes to be. Okay, she said at last. We keep the table set for 2 guests, wanting and fear. We also save a chair for honesty, even when it arrives late. Deal, he said. They stood at the bandstand's edge, watching the rain relax into mist. Emily felt changed, not by lightning, but by water. Walk you home? He asked. She nodded. Yes. They stepped into the evening, jackets heavy, shoes slick, moving in rhythm across the shining path. At her corner, they paused under a street lamp that haloed every drop. Emily reached for his hand first this time. He squeezed. Text me when you're in, he said. I will? Emily? She looked up. I like us in the rain, he said. We tell the truth better when the sky insists on it. She smiled despite the ghost of worry still tracing her ribs. Then pray for a drizzle. We have things to tell. He stepped back, reluctant, and turned toward the subway. She watched until he became one more shape in the weather. Her heartbeat was a metronome in her throat, steady but too loud, measuring a future she couldn't quite read, a map half drawn in pencil and blurred by rain tonight. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number bloomed with a single line, a stone through glass. "We need to talk." It's about Daniel. The rain, somehow, began again. The winter night pressed itself against Emily's apartment windows, snow falling in soft spirals like ash from an unseen fire. She had lit a single candle on the coffee table, more for comfort than light, and the room glowed with the kind of warmth that asked to be shared. Daniel sat across from her on the couch, his long frame folded casually, a mug of tea cradled in his hands. His damp hair was still drying from the shower, a trace of rain lingering on his jacket by the door. For the first hour, they spoke easily, laughter threading between them like ribbon movies they both secretly loved. The terrible takeout place on 7th that somehow never went out of business. The quiet joy of finding a bookstore no one else seemed to know about. Emily felt herself loosen, her body fitting into the rhythm of his presence, the way a puzzle piece clicks into its space. But then, almost without warning, the conversation shifted. Daniel had been describing a project from his consulting job when he trailed off, his eyes fixed on the flame of the candle. The silence stretched just long enough for Emily to sense its weight. "What is it?" she asked softly. He shook his head, but the lines around his mouth betrayed him. "Nothing important." "Daniel." Her voice carried both patience and insistence. "Don't hide behind that word. If it's on your mind, it matters." He looked at her then, the hesitation raw in his eyes. "You remember when I told you my ex reached out?" Emily nodded, her chest tightening. Maya. The name felt foreign on her tongue, a character in a story she hadn't chosen to read. "She wasn't just an ex," he said quietly. "She was almost my future." Emily's breath caught. She forced her body to stay still, though the words struck with precision. "I met her in college," he continued, staring past the candle as if the flame replayed the memories. "We were reckless, headlong, the kind of couple that believed passion could conquer everything. For a while, it felt true. She believed in me, my designs, my big plans. She was the first person who made me think I could change the world." "What happened?" Emily asked, though part of her wanted to close the question before it left her lips. He exhaled, the sound jagged. "I failed. Not just the project I told you about, though that was part of it. I started questioning myself, doubting everything. She wanted someone who fought for their future. I couldn't even fight for my own work. She left before I had the courage to tell her I was already breaking." The words hung between them, heavy with old grief. Emily's heart pulled toward him, but another part recoiled, fearful, jealous, uncertain. "Do you still love her?" The question escaped before she could catch it. Daniel's eyes snapped to hers. "No." His answer was firm, almost too fast, as if rehearsed. He softened then, his voice quieter. "But the ghost of what I lost still follows me. Not her. The version of me I thought I could be." Emily swallowed hard. She recognized the echo of his confession, deep in herself, the ghost of her own disappointment, the family who had taken what was hers, the version of herself that still waited for the freedom of an apartment key. She realized with a chill that they weren't just two people falling for each other. They were two people carrying shadows, colliding in the half-light. "Daniel," she whispered, leaning closer. "You don't have to be that version of yourself for me." He studied her, searching her face for something unspoken. "And what about you, Emily? You talk about your family, but you don't really let me in. What are your ghosts?" The question cut deeper than she expected. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. "Mine tell me I'll never come first, that I'll always be the dependable one, the one who gives up what's hers because someone else needs it more, and that if I trust again, If I trust too much, I'll be left with empty hands. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick as fog. The candle wavered, its flame bowing in the draught. Daniel reached across the coffee table, his hand covering hers. His skin was warm, grounding. Then let's promise something. No ghosts in the room without names. If we carry them, we speak them. No silent shadows. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to believe in promises, but the scars of broken ones still burned. What if speaking them makes us realize we can't carry each other's weight? Then we'll know, he said simply. Better than drowning in silence. The simplicity of his answer disarmed her. She looked at him fully, the shadows of the candlelight sculpting his face. Vulnerability softened his strength, made him achingly human. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he whispered. Their hands tightened together, neither releasing first. Later, after the candle burned lower and the tea had gone cold, Emily leaned against Daniel on the couch. The television murmured in the background, forgotten. His arm rested around her shoulders, not possessive, just there like a wall against the cold. I don't want to hurt you, he murmured into her hair. You won't, she said, though the certainty wavered. Not if we keep naming the ghosts. He kissed the top of her head, and for a moment, she let herself believe it. Yet, as the clock ticked toward midnight, Emily felt the quiet unease linger, like the echo of footsteps down a hallway. Love was blooming. Yes, but between them, she could sense the fragile fault lines of old wounds, waiting. Asterisk. The cold sharpened everything that night, the stars, the laugh of strangers by the river, the edge of Emily's doubts. She and Daniel walked shoulder to shoulder, breath lifting like small lanterns. The storm that had soaked them days ago had left the streets rinsed and clean. Let's stop here, Daniel said, nodding toward a pedestrian bridge over the slow black water. Icicles hung from the railings like glass notes. They stood in the middle, watching the river carry torn reflections of neon. Daniel turned to her, winter and sincerity shaping his face. I've been thinking about the ghosts, he said. Yours and mine. Emily's mouth lifted. We invited them to the table, and forgot to set a place for a promise. He took her gloved hands. I am not your parents. I won't take what's yours. I won't decide for you, because it's easier. If we don't know, we ask. If we're afraid, we say it. I won't use your trust like a spare key. I'll knock. Warmth-lit rooms she kept locked. You can have a key, she whispered. But the rule is you still knock. Deal. He leaned closer. May I kiss you? Yes. The kiss felt less like fire and more like a vow a lamp lit and carried carefully through a house. When they parted, he didn't let go. I promise I'll never betray you, he said. Not by silence, not by convenience. Promises are fragile animals. Even naming them startles them. Emily heard the tremor in his voice and in her own chest. Then I promise to tell you when I'm afraid, she said. Even when fear wants me quiet. They watched the river a while longer. Somewhere, fireworks tried a single embered bloom. Come home with me, she said. Just for tea. For warmth. For tea, he agreed. In her apartment, the heater clicked like a friendly metronome. She brewed Earl Grey. Bergamot lifted into the room like a small miracle. They sat on the rug. He told her about a client who wanted a diagram to tell the truth more kindly. She told him about a field trip to the planetarium where she learned that starlight is old news. Maybe love is old news, too, he said, smiling sideways. It arrives late, but real. Maybe, she said, embarrassed by how much she wanted to believe him. They traded small confessions. He slept with the window cracked in winter. She kept seashells in a jar, though the ocean was far. Their knees bumped, their laughter unspooled. The apartment felt less like a waiting room and more like a room, He wandered to the bookcase. You organize by color, by mood, she said. Blue when I want quiet. Red when I want nerve. What's tonight? Gold. She held up a battered poetry book with a gilt spine. For vows, he returned and read her a short poem, voice low enough to feel smuggled. When he finished, he looked up, as if asking whether he'd knocked too loudly. Stay, she said. He hesitated. I want to. I also want to do this right. Staying can be right, she said. We could sleep and let the night do the talking. They didn't rush. They learned the grammar of each other's quiet. When they finally lay down, her head found his chest. His heartbeat tucked itself under her ear like a small, steady drum. She slept without dreaming. Morning pared the city to bone. Pale light glazed the window. Daniel kissed her hair and stood reluctantly. I have a 9 o'clock, he said. Urban housing proposal. You'll win them with integrity, she said. He laughed, found his scarf, found her mouth, then the door. Text me later? I will. After he left, the apartment held his outline. Emily made toast, and on impulse, started a list on the refrigerator notepad. Things that feel like a promise. Number 1, breakfast dishes left to dry because there will be another breakfast. Number 2, a key on the table with a note that says still knocking. Number 3, a name said softly in the morning. Work was busy enough to keep her afloat. At lunch, she typed him a message about the planetarium offering discounted tickets. He answered with a star emoji, and teach me the constellations tonight. Her ribs brightened, but promises are tested by ordinary life. At 3, her mother called. Sweetheart, her mother began, apology on her tone. The gas bill. We're short this month. Emily's throat tightened. How short? 80, maybe 90. Your stepdad's hours were cut again. I hate asking. You're not asking, Emily said, hearing steel in her voice. You're telling. A beat. Softer. We're asking. Emily pictured the list on her fridge. I can't cover it this time, she said. I can help call the company and set up a plan. But I can't pay it. A quiet scrolled between them. You've changed, her mother said. I'm trying to, Emily answered. Please let me. After they hung up, she sat very still, hands trembling but not with shame. She texted Daniel. I said no today. It hurt. It also felt like standing up. He replied, proud of you. Tea and stars to celebrate? She answered yes. Dusk arrived wearing violet. Emily stopped at the market for lemons and honey. At home she tidied, humming. By 7, she watched the hall through the peephole. At 7:15, she laughed at herself and lit the kettle. At 7:30, she reread the poem. At 7:45, she checked her phone. No message. 8 o'clock. Nothing. 8:15. A text blinked. Running late. Client ran over. On my way soon. Relief and a prickle of unease braided in her. She set out mugs. She cut lemons into moons. 9 o'clock rolled over her like a slow wave. Another text, almost free. Promised. She stood at the window and watched the street perform its cold theater. A couple arguing gently in scarves. A delivery bike stitching the lanes. The kettle clicked off and on again. At 9:30, her phone chimed. Not Daniel. An unknown number. We should talk about Daniel. Please call. The same chill from the rainy night crawled her spine. She typed, who is this? The reply took a minute, and an Ira. Maya. Emily sat down as if the room had dropped to floor. She read the name again. The doorbell rang then, bright and domestic. Her heart leaped Daniel, but when she opened the door, the hallway was empty. A neighbor's kid thundered down the stairs. Somewhere a television laughed. Her phone buzzed. Daniel at last. Elevator. 2 minutes. She stared at the screen, then at the lemons, then at the sky. The new message glowed underneath his. I'm not here to ruin anything, but you should know what he hasn't told you. The elevator chimed down the hall. Emily touched the fridge list with her palm like a talisman. She swallowed. She did not delete the messages. She did not answer them. There was an agreement to keep and a promise about promises. But the hallway was filling with a different weather, and she could taste rain in a building that wasn't leaking. Tonight. Snow had turned to slush, and the city wore January like a coat it couldn't take off. Gray sky pressed down on buildings, and sidewalks gleamed with dirty ice. Emily sat at her kitchen table, a half-eaten apple on the plate before her, waiting for a reply that wouldn't come. Her last message to Daniel was 3 hours old. Are you still coming for dinner? No answer. She tried not to imagine scenarios, but her mind was fluent in what if. What if he was with Maya? What if the promises he made on the bridge were only words that melted like snow against warm skin? The kettle clicked, reminding her she was still here, still waiting. She poured tea, the steam softening her face, but the warmth didn't reach the gnawing in her chest. Meanwhile, Daniel stood in a glass office that suddenly felt like a cage. His client had pulled the funding from the project he'd been counting on his paycheck, his reputation, his chance to rebuild his career beyond consulting. Papers lay scattered on the desk like the aftermath of a storm. You promised us results, the client had said earlier, a tone colder than the winter outside. You bent, Daniel. Again. He clenched his jaw, replaying those words as if they'd been branded into him. Failure tasted familiar, metallic, like blood in the mouth. He wanted to tell Emily, to collapse into her warmth, but the thought of seeing disappointment in her eyes stopped him. He couldn't let his ghosts walk into her home again. Not yet. So he silenced his phone, stuffed the papers into his briefcase, and told himself he was protecting her. 2 days later, Emily finally saw him at her door, shoulders hunched, scarf loose as if he'd forgotten how to tie it. You disappeared, she said, arms crossed. His eyes flicked away. Work got messy? You couldn't send a single text? I didn't want to bring that weight to you. Her heart pinched. That is bringing weight, making me wonder if I matter enough to know what's happening. He stepped closer, voice low. You matter more than anything. That's why I didn't tell you. Emily closed her eyes, the words both balm and blade. Daniel, that's the same thing my parents said every time they made choices for me. We didn't want to burden you, but the silence is the burden. He froze, her words hitting harder than any client's scolding. Later, they sat on the couch, the air between them crowded with unspoken things. The candle on the table flickered, its flame small against the dark. Tell me what's going on, Emily said gently, softening her tone. Please, I don't want guesses and half-truths. Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. The project collapsed. The client pulled out. I bent when I should have fought, and now it's slipping through my fingers. Money's tight, tighter than I admitted. Emily's chest tightened. Why didn't you just say that? Because I'm supposed to be strong for you. I don't want to be another person who drains you, who takes what you've earned and uses it to patch my failures. Her voice cracked. Don't you see? It's not failure that breaks me. It's being shut out. If you just told me, I'd be in this with you. His silence stretched too long, guilt carving deep shadows into his features. The next week became a blur of near misses and almost conversations. Daniel buried himself in late meetings, calls that dragged past midnight, numbers scratched onto paper napkins. Emily, meanwhile, found herself staring at the fridge list she'd written weeks ago. Things that feel like a promise. She traced her finger over the words, but instead of comfort, they now felt like accusations. When Daniel finally came over again, she studied him as he set down his bag. He looked thinner, his shoulders carrying invisible weight. "Where were you last night?" she asked. "Working." His answer was clipped. "At midnight?" "I had to meet someone." "Who?" "Emily." He sighed, frustration leaking into his tone. "Not everything is a betrayal." Her stomach twisted. "Then why does it feel like one?" The silence that followed wasn't tender this time. It was jagged, filled with sharp edges that cut both of them. That night, Emily dreamt of the rain, again the bandstand, the honesty that had washed over them, the way their kiss had felt like truth. But when she woke, the bed was empty, and the echo of his absence was louder than any dream. Saturday arrived, brittle with cold. Emily decided to confront him, not with anger, but with the fear clawing at her chest. She invited him to the same cafe where they'd once shared laughter and secrets. He arrived late, hair tousled, eyes weary. "You're avoiding me," she said. When he sat down, "I'm avoiding myself," he admitted. Her throat tightened. "Do you want me here, Daniel? Or am I just another weight?" He reached across the table, fingers trembling as they found hers. "You're the only thing holding me together. Then stop shutting me out." Her voice cracked. "Stop making me feel like I'm waiting for another shoe to drop. My parents broke my trust by deciding for me. Don't become another echo of them." His eyes filled with something unspoken. But before he could reply, his phone buzzed. Emily watched as his face changed when he saw the screen. He silenced it quickly, slipping it back into his pocket, but the damage was done. "Who was that?" she asked. "No one important." Her heart plummeted. "Don't lie to me, Emily." He looked away, jaw tight. The ghosts between them roared back to life. They walked out together, the air colder than before. At the corner, Emily stopped. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she whispered. Daniel's face drained. "Don't say that. Then give me something real, something solid to stand on." For a heartbeat, she thought he would finally tell her everything. But he stayed silent, and silence became its own confession. She turned, her footsteps brittle against the ice. Snow in the gutters had gone the color of old paper. Emily promised herself she would speak, not guess. Listen, not assume. She tucked Daniel's scarf into her bag and took the train across the river, the city sliding by like pages she'd already read. Out his building smelled of paint and heat. She climbed the stairs, counting to steady her breath. When she reached his door, she almost knocked with the scarf, still clutched in her fist. Daniel opened quickly, as if he'd been waiting. His shirt was half-tucked. His hair had lost the argument with his hands. "You're here," he said, relief and worry braided into 3 small words. "I said we should talk." She stepped in. His apartment wore fatigue mug rings, leaning drafts, a plant making a gallant attempt at hope. Rain began against the window. "I made coffee," he said. "Or tea, if—" "Coffee's fine." She set the scarf on a chair like a stand-in for things returned properly. "I want the whole of it." He poured, the spoon clicking against the mug. "The project is dead. 2 smaller contracts went with it. I've been juggling cutting, calling, trying not to drown the people I'm responsible for. I thought if I bridged the month, it would right itself." "How did you bridge it?" He hesitated. "A short-term loan," he admitted, "and a delayed rent agreement. I put you as my emergency contact because the form wouldn't submit without one. And you put me where?" "As the contact. Not a guarantor," he said quickly. "If something happened, they could call you." He winced. "I should have asked." Emily felt the old ache open. "Yes," she said, steady, cold. "You should have. I told myself I was keeping your life clear. That asking would make my mess yours. Choosing for me made it mine anyway." Her voice was soft. "That's the pattern I'm trying to end," he swallowed. "I hear you. And last Thursday?" she asked. The night you were stuck with clients? He flinched. Landlord. Then he stopped. Then what? Maya, he said. She asked to meet. I told her to stop contacting me. I should have told you before or not gone at all. I picked what felt like the least bad choice, and it still feels wrong. You hid the meeting and wrote my name on your forms, she said, each fact a bead on a string. You promised to knock. I did, he said, voice fraying, and I failed. Not because you don't matter. Because I'm terrified that if I show you each broken board, you'll decide I'm not a house worth entering. She moved to the window, palm to the cool. You don't get to use my love to hide from your fear, she said. That's a theft, too. I don't want to be that man. Wanting isn't choosing. Silence gathered. On his counter, a rubber-banded stack of mail waited. She reached. The top envelope flashed a red bar. Final notice. The next. Past due. A slim letter beneath showed the phrase default clause. Through its window. This is more than a bad week. It is, he said. And I've been foolish and proud and afraid. I can sit with fear, she said. I can carry shame while you learn to put it down. But I can't keep discovering what you should have brought me first. He stood until they were a breath apart. What do you need from me? The truth before I trip over it. And proof you know the difference between a partner and a parachute. He closed his eyes, opened them. I'll call the lender today. I'll loop you in. You won't, she said. Loop in a counselor. Loop in the landlord. I'm not your plan B, Daniel. I'm the person you promised to knock for. You're right. She folded the scarf. I'm going to go. He looked startled, then resigned. Is this a break? It's a boundary, she said. I'm stepping back until the ground under us is something you've actually built. He followed her to the door, hands open. Emily, she lifted a hand and he stopped. I love you, she said, the words wearing work boots. That's exactly why I can't teach you how to treat me. He broke, caught it, broke again. I love you too. She stepped into the hallway. And show me a love that knocks. Not one that assumes the door's open. She took the stairs, the rail cold and sure. On the second-floor landing, she leaned against the window. A trio of kids below stomped at a puddle. Somewhere a siren grated itself thin. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail, unknown number. Maya's voice unfurled, low, careful. Emily, you don't know me. I won't call again. I met Daniel to return something letters he wrote years ago. Plans we made that I didn't want him carrying anymore. He told me he loves you. He told me to stop writing. I'm not your enemy. I'm part of a story he's trying to finish. I hope you both get to keep the parts that matter. Emily wanted relief. What arrived was sorrow, bright and clean grief for the way the past leaks into the present, even when nobody is doing the wrong thing now. On the train back, the city blurred. She typed, then deleted a dozen messages to Daniel. At home she made tea and opened her notebook to a new page. She wrote, breaking point, then, leaving is not the opposite of love. Sometimes it is an act of faith in both of us. Her hand steadied. Another vow. I will not shrink so someone else can feel tall. I will not carry what was hidden from me. The apartment answered with ordinary sounds, the kettle complaining, the radiator ticking. She set Daniel's scarf on the chair where it had been and sat across from it, as if it were a witness. Night arrived in increments. She tried a movie, then silence. She tried music, then the quiet behind it. At 9, her phone lit with his name. She let it go to voicemail, then listened. At the lender today, he said, voice thin with exhaustion. Called a counselor. Told the landlord I'd bring a plan, not a promise. I know I have to learn to live out loud. I'm starting. I'll give you space. I will knock. Space wasn't a punishment. It was a room being built. She put the phone down face first, as if it could learn to be patient. Outside, wind worried the street signs. She pulled the blanket over her legs and read the same stanza 3 times without keeping it. At 10:30, another knock sounded not on wood, but in her email. A message from the lender's portal, forwarded with his name, CCD to the counselor. Short, factual. Revised payment schedule attached. Meeting confirmed. Proof. Not a parachute. A plan. She drafted another message, no poetry this time. Take care of the plan. I'll take care of me. She didn't send it, but saving it steadied her like a handrail on stairs. She drafted a reply. Thank you for showing me. Keep going, then watch the cursor blink like a heartbeat she wasn't ready to match. She pulled on boots and walked the block. A night smelled of iron and lemons from late kitchen. A guitarist under the bodega awning played 3 honest chords. A couple danced happily in the slush. She paused at the corner and looked toward the river she couldn't see. Bridges, she thought, are built in weather, not in weather's absence. On the stoop, her neighbor was salting the steps. Storm coming? He asked. Maybe, she said. Maybe wind. Back upstairs, she set a glass of water beside the scarf, as if it too needed tending. She turned off the lamp. In the dark, the apartment hummed. She hesitated at the window, watching the street shift. A man walked his dog. The dog looked like a small rumor finally confirmed. Emily pressed her forehead to the glass. I choose me, she said, and then softer. And I hope it still means choosing you. Later. The word later hung like a lantern. Sleep brought the river bridge, empty and lit by patient stars. She stood at its center, hearing a knock, far away one that didn't demand, only asked. She wanted to answer. She waited to see if it would come again. The weeks after the breaking point blurred and sharpened at once, like the city seen through a rain-streaked window. For the first time in years, Emily lived without waiting for a text, a knock, a decision made on her behalf. She woke in the mornings not with dread, but with the small thrill of having chosen herself. She filled her time differently. Saturday mornings were for the farmer's market, where she learned the names of herbs she'd only ever tasted in restaurants. Tuesdays she took a pottery class, her hands sinking into cool clay, rediscovering the quiet joy of making something messy and hers. Nights were quieter, sometimes lonely, but the loneliness was honest. It belonged to her, not to someone else's absence. One evening, after trimming a candlewick, she opened her notebook. The page where she had written breaking point stared back at her, stark but steady. She turned it and began a new page. Things that feel like a beginning. 1. Waking up without apology. 2. A room that hums with silence. Not secrets. 3. Learning to carry my own weight. Not everyone else's. 4. Choosing company, not clinging to it. The list was short, but it was hers. Across the river, Daniel worked. Harder, but also differently. The counselor sessions became a mirror he couldn't avoid. He learned to speak the words he had once swallowed, to name fear before it built a wall. He sat with lenders, with his landlord, even with colleagues he once avoided. Slowly, he unstitched the pattern of bending too easily, and stitched something sturdier in its place. But the hardest work was quieter, walking past Emily's street and not climbing the steps, resisting the urge to text her every time progress was made, holding the silence she had asked for, and learning to grow inside it. It was early March when the season cracked open. Snowmelt ran down gutters like veins of glass. Emily sat at her usual cafe table, sketchbook open, her pencil tracing lines that might become balls or might become nothing at all. The bell above the door jingled. She didn't look up until she heard her name. Emily. Her hand froze. She lifted her gaze, and there he was, Daniel, taller somehow, his posture less burdened, eyes steady but searching. He didn't sit until she gestured to the chair across from her. "Hi," she said, cautious warmth threading her voice. "Hi." He folded his hands on the table. "You look good, stronger." "I am," she said simply. He nodded. "I've been working on everything. Not just the job, me. I didn't come to ask for anything, only to tell you that." Something inside her shifted, but she kept her voice even. "Why now?" "Because I promised to knock." He gave a half smile. "This is me knocking." Her chest tightened. "And if I don't open, then I'll keep living what I've learned. Loving you doesn't mean owning your yes." She studied him. His face held no desperation, only honesty. For the first time, she believed he wasn't asking her to shrink so he could feel tall. "Tell me one thing," she said. "What's different?" He leaned forward slightly. "I used to think protecting you meant hiding my mess. Now I know protection is telling you the truth, even when it's ugly. I used to see your strength as something to lean on. Now I see it as something to stand beside. And I used to fear silence. Now I know it can mean respect." Her throat ached. "That's 3 things. Then maybe I've learned more than I thought." They both laughed, quietly, the sound like thawing ice. The days that followed were not fireworks. They were small, careful steps. Coffee after pottery class. A walk through the market where she introduced him to the herb seller. An evening where he showed her the new sketches he'd started again, buildings that didn't need to be grand. Only human. Each moment felt like testing a bridge with cautious steps, listening for creaks, but finding the planks held. One night, he joined her on the couch. No pretense, no grand speeches. Just them, the hum of the radiator, the soft glow of a lamp. "I want to be here," he said. "Not to be saved. Just to be." Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "I want that too. But we do it with open doors, Daniel. No more secrets. Deal." They sat in the quiet, letting the promise settle not as fireworks, but as a steady sunrise. Weeks stretched, and spring began to show itself in shy crocuses on the sidewalk. Emily realized she no longer carried the constant ache of bracing for disappointment. Her trust didn't return all at once. It grew like new leaves, cautious but determined. One Saturday morning, Daniel brought her to the river bridge, where he had once promised never to betray her. The water below ran brighter now, freed of ice. "I wanted to stand here again," he said, "because promises can't live in one night. They need to be remade over and over." She smiled faintly. "So remake it." He took her hands. "I promise to be real, even when it's messy. I promise to tell you before the ghosts do. And I promise to keep knocking, even if the door takes time to open." She looked at him, the morning sun painting his face gold. "Then I promise to open the door when I'm ready." And not a moment sooner, their kiss wasn't firework bright. It was sunrise, slow, warming, certain.